This is the newest addition to my one tile per episode series, Fort Francia Bay, and today's video is all about
I like trains.
I'm Imperatur, just a chill guy who loves playing city building games, and you're watching me building the first rail yard for our city's commuter rail service, as well as an industrial area and a metro transfer hub all in one episode in the classic Imperatur speed build style. The build time was roughly 7.5 hours with no crash this time. Today we are starting to extend the sunken highway to the north, so we are basically simply continuing the route that it originally has, but with a slightly different and lowered routing. I also would like to thank you so much for the support on the last episode. What a warm welcome to 2025 that was. The sunken highway video went down extremely well with you. We can definitely continue like this. But back to the video. We have an upward gradient here in this valley. I'm going to minimize it a bit, but it's also not a real valley, so to speak. In the distance of one or two more tiles, the terrain ends at a hilltop, and then I have to wind the highway over it somehow if I don't want to shape the whole map terrain, which I've already done in the past, to be fair, as with the waterfall episode for example. So what do you think? Should we create a valley here instead? It's not really a problem if we change parts of the map so that we can add cool features or simply make the map a bit more interesting, like meandering a river into this valley here for example. I think that would be pretty cool too. What do you think about that? Should we change the map a bit to make the topography more interesting, or should we leave it like that and try to respect the existing terrain? Here I've also leveled the terrain for our very first rail yard for the city. We built a metro depot 2 episodes ago, and now we also finally have a rail yard in the city limits. It will be one of the most important depots for our commuter rail service in the city. But we had to change it a bit, of course. It's pretty cool that you can use the Better Bulldozer mod to remove individual rail pieces from the depot and build new ones without affecting the functionality. I did the same here because I think that the track layout is not very well done by the vanilla asset, and the curves and switches are overall very sharp. I just don't like the look of the track layout, to be honest, so I extended the rails here and added a few more tracks to make it a bit more to my liking and also make more room for parked trains. I also connected it with the 2 railroad lines, which will then continue over the highway over a large arch bridge as you saw in the opening cinematics. But we won't deal with all the details around the depot until the very end of the episode. I always find it quite difficult to make rail yards look good and appealing in the game, because in real life they always look very messy, with lots of different ground surfaces and random props. So stay tuned to see how everything turned out. Here I've broken up the 2 one-way streets at the edge of the sunken highway and merged them into one main arterial road again, which will then serve more of the local traffic. So to speak, this road splits its directions, runs along the highway and connects back together under the highway interchange, which is pretty cool. I've also added a metro stop here and connected it to the metro tracks from the last episode. I'll build an elevated metro stop above it so that we have an important transfer hub for the city's public transportation network. The whole thing is a bit out in the middle of nowhere though, but that's not a bad thing, as it also serves a small industrial area, but is in general intended more as a transfer point between different lines and not really as a destination. I was a little inspired by the track triangle or East Cross in Berlin. Berlin is always a big inspiration, especially for rail transport, because the city simply has a very well developed rail network and also has many cool features such as over and underpasses. Generally, many lines run above ground, which is something I would like to realize here in the city as well. Please don't ask me what I'm up to here again. Somehow I just like building complicated stuff that goes over and under roads and tracks and stuff. It's not necessary at all, but somehow I just love things like that. That's why New York City is so fascinating for me, because there we have tons of scenes like that. And yeah, because of the changing terrain here, we are building a metro line that's relatively high above street level on the left, so we can use the normal road arch bridge, which we built with Anarchy, and move it just underneath the tracks. I really love the look of this bridge, and I would have wished we would have more variations of bridges in the game, because they are such important features in a cityscape. On one end the elevated structure is quite high, but then on the right we arrive back at the right height above the station, so that we can build this elevated metro station. So the transfer station of the two lines results. The line will then continue with a bridge over the rail yard and ends in a tunnel at the edge of the mountain. The tunnel will later go through the whole hill. And yeah, we'll just see where it goes after that. In my opinion, this is a pretty cool tip if you play modded CS2. You can also use the road bridges for your rail bridges. Just take the road, place it next to the spot where you want to have it, and move it under the rails with the Move It mod, and like that you have a cool arch bridge that spans quite a long distance over the highway here, for example. With the better bulldozer mod we can then also remove the individual pillars, and so we simply have a much better end result than if we only used the boring concrete bridges everywhere. In the next section I'll just put these train vertical pillars under the metro tracks to get a shorter post spacing. I think these concrete subway bridges often look way too modern, and I want to go for an overall older look in my city. So I put a lot of these concrete pillars under the tracks and then moved them into place with Move It, so we always have roughly the same spacing everywhere. The whole thing is extremely time consuming, but at the end of the day it's worth it in my opinion. But probably not everyone is as dedicated as me for a single metro bridge. In New York, for example, we also have these concrete viaducts of the subway, and of course it's not exactly in the same style here because these little arches are missing, but they would be way too laborious to recreate here, even for me. Otherwise, when we do it that way, it looks much better than if you just had these single posts in the middle of the tracks with the large gaps in between. So to build this way more easily, we definitely need a NYC subway DLC with many different stations. Also some of the most prominent stations, and of course the different types of tracks like the steel or concrete viaducts, but also the 3-track and 4-track elevated structures for the express service. That would be my biggest dream, honestly. The Metro Overhaul mod of CS1 was a great example and came really close, and it was such a pleasure to build metro systems with that mod. So please, Colossal Order, make my dream come true and release a New York City subway or Chicago L DLC. Speaking of DLCs, which DLC do you want the most and the fastest? Let me know in the comments. In the next chapter, we will look at the immediate surroundings of the metro station. It's going to be mostly wasteland and just grass and parking lots, to be fair. I know it's not really the best use of land and it should definitely be designed differently, but like I said, it's just a transfer station and doesn't serve as a destination in general. This area here is very industrialized and therefore we only have a pedestrian bridge that leads to the industrial area, which consists mainly of small industrial halls and warehouses, but also has a few office and commercial buildings. We also have a large supermarket here, and I'm going to connect the whole thing with footpaths so that people can walk over the tracks in a relaxed manner. Actually, I would have built residential areas here too, but we urgently need jobs because we have an unemployment rate of around 30% right now, and that's just far too much and completely unrealistic. Not unrealistic in all parts of the world, but for a North American city, or rather the city is actually a mixture of all parts of the world, especially Europe and North America, but you know what I mean. That's why we need to build a lot more offices and industrial areas in the next few episodes, but I hope that the city center and all the office towers will bring a bit more jobs to the city. We also need to expand the harbor, and there we'll also find a large industrial area, which fortunately has the wind direction so that the wind sweeps all the pollution out over the water and not over the city itself. So we've got a good foundation for a lot of industrial and office expansion in the near future. We also hit 70k inhabitants, which is crazy, but we're also already 19 episodes in. Can't wait to expand the city further. And if you want to check out everything yourself, you could visit my Patreon site, linked in the video description, where you'll find the save games, mod lists and so on. Here I decided to build a fuel plant. However, we already have it in the city, but with the Find It mod you can easily place it again, and I think it just fits perfectly into this location and is also another large company, a large employer with a lot of jobs, which we really need in the city. As I mentioned, this also makes sense here next to the metro station, so the workers can arrive very relaxed by metro and only have to walk across the street and are actually already there. In terms of pollution, I'll have to see how the whole thing develops, but I've tried not to designate any more industrial areas right next to it, so that the pollution doesn't multiply as it would otherwise. Down here next to the highway I try desperately to create jobs again. So we're going to add more businesses, small offices and industrial buildings here. I'll use 2x4 buildings most of the time because I think they have a very nice compact size that fills the whole lot, and that's just the look I want to go for in these densely populated areas. I don't think it always looks so cool if you only have small buildings with large parking lots around them, but rather, as I said, small compact buildings which all have the same size. Here on the edge of the hill we will have 2x2 detached houses again. They will be mostly from the UK pack, but will also mix in a few waterfront houses or just normal single family homes. What I'm particularly looking forward forward to again is detailing the area around the electricity pylons, because I think it just looks so extremely cool with the undergrowth and the bushes under the power lines, but also the different ground textures. It's almost one of my favorite parts of the whole city. It also looks very cool with the terrain, it's just very hilly here, and that just makes the whole area a bit more exciting. And yes, it's also a lot more fun to use that in, instead of just building on a flat plane, because then it makes sense, for example, to run roads or rails over and under each other, instead of leaving everything on the same level. But let me know what you think is still my most favorite build of the whole series. I have one in mind, and a little tip, it's not the waterfalls. It is true that it is very painful to place each tree individually, especially in the right hand at some point, but I think it's worth it nevertheless. This way you simply have a much denser forestation and more control over where individual trees are. And you can also hide things very well with the different densities and sizes of the trees, such as these edges here, and the glitchy terrain that is still there from the rail yard. The asset has lowered the terrain squarely around itself, which is very annoying, but with this road that winds up here in the concrete walls, you can hide it quite well. And as I said, the trees also help to fill this hole that has been created. And then we come already to my favorite part, namely the green spaces underneath the power lines. Off camera, I also placed a little basketball court on the curve of the footpath. Imagine the view with the sunset and the skyline in the background you'll have from up here. Dream. The last thing missing now is the detailing of the rail yard. The first thing we're going to build here is a public housing block though, but it won't be functional because it's on the little hill next to the tracks here and not quite on the street. But that doesn't matter, because we already have enough people and, as I said, we need more jobs than population anyway. In general, the city feels pretty busy for the most part and it's not even noticeable if a few buildings aren't functional from time to time. Some streets are hopelessly overloaded, especially at rush hour twice a day. And I think we need a traffic fix video from Biffa soon. On my TikTok you'll see the longest traffic jam ever. I thought the city is pretty well designed actually, but there is one weak spot and I thought about it so often by now, but it's just not fixable because we have no room to change the road layout at all. Now we come to the last section of today's episode. Thank you already very much for watching this far, you're legends. And yes, we are finally detailing the rail yard. For this we simply used many different surfaces, but at first we used the track gravel surface to blend in the rail tracks a bit more. The base comes first, then the thick one, and lastly the thin one. If you then mix the whole thing with other surfaces and decals, you will get a realistic look. For the textures underneath I would use the earth or ore surfaces. You will find the mod list on my Patreon if you're not sure which one to use, and then you have that earthy muddy look that we can also find in real life at rail yards. Of course, we also need a few props such as small warehouses or other industrial props, and a few stacks of metal, which should simply represent replacement rails. Then we surround the whole thing with a fence, place a few small bushes here and there, and at the very end we put a few commuter rail trains on the tracks to bring a bit more life. It's also important to match the color of the train engine with the recolor mod. Otherwise the whole thing will just be far too colorful and it will look stupid again. But you can see for yourself. I'll see you again in the outro. Very cool that you stuck around to the end and watched me build Tile 19, our newest addition to Fort Francia Bay. I'm definitely really pleased with how everything turned out. Here we can see the before and after, and I think now I love trains even more. We laid out the perfect rail infrastructure for our commuter rail network and can now expand the tracks more and more into the outskirts of the city in the upcoming episodes, so stay tuned and subscribe to not miss any of the next videos. Maybe I inspired you to build and detail heavy rail and heavy industry in your city too. Who knows? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, you can give the video a like. If you want to support me further, you can visit my Patreon site. There you will find a save game for every episode, and with this addition the city has definitely become one amazing addition richer. You're very welcome to explore everything yourself down to the last detail. But don't forget to download all the mods I use. The mod list is also available there. And we can also chat a bit and have a nice time, of course. I would like to thank all the people who have already decided to support me on Patreon so much. But can we reach 500 active patrons by next month? That would be amazing and another big milestone. Your support over there makes videos like this on such a regular basis even possible, so if you want to see more, you know what to do. But now I say see you for the next episode when we'll continue with the next tile until we fill out the complete map, so please give a like if you support the project. Have a nice day and ciao ciao for now.